Hello everyone and welcome. This is Michaela Conley, HP CareerNet and Health Promotion Live. It's Friday again, hooray, and I guess it's snowing in Michigan. Sorry about that, you upper Midwest people. I'd really like to have some in Maryland though, if you wouldn't mind sending just a few flakes down. You don't have to decide now, think about it. So, welcome. Let's see, if you have any questions, we'll save them to the end, type them into the box, and we'll be sure that John addresses as many as we can. And yeah, and as I said, we have John today who's going to talk about mindfulness, show up for your real life. And for those of you who don't know John, I can't imagine how you can not know John. He's here with us a lot because he is truly loved by us and you. Anyway, Dr. John Weaver is a licensed psychologist and is the director of the Healthy Thinking Institute Workplace Wellness Program. He has a clinical practice and is a business consultant. He is the chair of the Wisconsin Psychological Association's Psychologically Healthy Workplace Committee and is an accomplished professional speaker. And I hope that looks like he's coming back in. And I sent him to his room, not really his room, but I sent him off. There you are, John. Presenter, to find a wired signal because we were kind of dropping off a little bit there. Do you hear me, John? Oops. Yeah.
I do hear you.
Yay! Okay. Now it looks like I have the right presenter selected. So do you see the share my screen button?
I'm here.
All right. So I think we're ready to go. As you were scurrying about in the background, I was doing sort of the intro spiel. So I think we're ready whenever you are.
All right, I just got to find the screen again. I'm not seeing it here.
Okay, well, let's see. I see.
See, there it is. All right. And I don't think that there I am. Okay, show my screen. There we are.
Okay,
In
Kelly.
the meantime, all the people on the call are being very mindful.
That's right. And very forgiving because, things act dumb. So, John, I see you as being offline, which is kind of disturbing. Oh, now you're back online. And there, I just passed the controls to you.
Online. All right. All right.
Happy Murphy's Law Friday.
Okay.
There you are.
Screen. Okay.
Screen and audio.
And you got me?
Yes. Fire when ready.
All right. Well, let's start and all of the slides because we're still having some difficulties. Hopefully, you'll still be able to. And what I want to do is take a little bit of time as we go through this, and I'm going to stop at 3 different points so that we can have a couple of questions or comments as we go through this. About my family. My wife and I, just before Thanksgiving of 2003, our youngest son came home to sit with us. He sat down. He had a very serious look on his face, and he announced to us that in the wake of the terrorist attacks in 2011, he had decided, or 9/11 and 2001, he had decided to join. He went through basic training and became part of a reserve group. And in 2004, 2005, his unit was activated and deployed to 7 months, because that's what the Marines did in what was at the time the most dangerous part of Iraq. and he was guarding the most dangerous road in the world during that time. Just south of Baghdad, called the Triangle of Death, that in fact Saddam Hussein was never able to fully get under control. So that's where he was. There are a lot of things about how people, how I actually could deal with the stress of having.
All right, and here is the link.
All right, am I back on?
You are back on. I just sent the link to
slides
for everybody who wants them, and I'm going to stop talking. John, go for it.
All right. So I was telling you, and I don't know when I cut out exactly, but I was telling you that one of the things that I discovered when our son was in Iraq was that there were some things that I discovered that were a real surprise to me about how to make a difference in dealing with the stress of having somebody that was in a situation like that. One of the things that I learned was that the Marines had a saying that the first time I heard it, I thought was one of the stupidest things that I had ever seen or ever heard in my life. The saying that the Marines had was, when you hear the sound of the gunfire, run towards it. That, to me, turned out to be one of the most helpful things that I had ever heard in what we did in order to deal with having a son in one of the more dangerous places in the world at the time. We knew that there were good reasons for us to worry. That wasn't something that was at all in question. The only question was, how do we go about doing that in a way that that helped us to worry about the right things? So instead of trying to avoid thinking about it or pretend it wasn't happening, we learned as much as we could about the area. We learned as much as we could about what was going on, and we kept ourselves as informed as we could throughout the entire time. One of the things that that mindfulness is it's about really showing up and really being present to your life as it actually is. That's the thing that I want to focus on during our time today. Now, I'm not seeing my screen showing up here, so I'm going to go on and talk with you as if there isn't a PowerPoint to be watching as we do this, because I'm not sure exactly how to get it going. Well, maybe that's it.
There you go.
Is it up? Okay.
Yep. Good.
We'll see whether that shows or not. But if it doesn't, my PowerPoint slides aren't information packed anyway, so try to hang in there with me. One of the things that I think is true more and more as I work in a variety of wellness fields is that mindfulness, the ability to be mindful, and we're going to take a few moments in a short period of time and define what that actually is, but mindfulness is a basic skill that's necessary in order to do all of the different things that we're trying to do with helping people to live healthier and more complete lives. Let me tell you what I think is often kind of the basic problem. Much of wellness and health promotion has come out of a medical model. And the assumption of the medical model is that there's a crisis, an acute problem that needs to get solved. What we did when we began to move past dealing simply with acute problems and started dealing with chronic problems is we treated it as essentially the same thing. So much of what you have heard oftentimes in health promotion kinds of activities and wellness kinds of activities is essentially a message that is designed to scare people enough to get their attention in order to get them to make changes in their lives. For example, you've got high blood pressure, you're overweight. If you don't get that under control, you're going to have a heart attack and you're going to die. Well, it turns out we use these kinds of strategies because they work in the short term. If somebody has a heart attack and they recover and the doctor sits down with them and says, you've got to exercise more, you've got to change your diet, you've got to pay more attention to your stress level, we see people making remarkable changes within the next 3 months of their lives. Most people lose significant amounts of weight. Most people are much more ready to do things differently in their lives. But when we check back in with them about 6 months out, and certainly by a year out, almost none of those people who have made changes have sustained those changes over the long term. And part of the reason is because when we base our message on trying to help people to be afraid of things so that they will change, what they do is they make changes long enough to resolve the issue so that they can get back to their regular life. And so as soon as the issue is resolved, they have a great deal of impetus, a great deal of motivation to try to get back to the life they had before this crisis occurred. Our brains are set up for that. In fact, when we are under stress, what tends to happen is that we narrow our focus. We narrow it down to look at what the crisis is, to see the crisis as clearly as we can if we're healthy, to do something to resolve the crisis so that when the crisis is over, then we can go back to our regular life. Without changing the way people approach their lives on a day-to-day level, on a moment-to-moment level, there isn't a very high probability that people are actually going to sustain the changes that they need to live healthier lives. And so that means that we really have to approach this in a different way. We've got to start looking at how to help people to connect to a healthier life rather than avoid a series of health problems, a series of illness problems. And the way that people connect to a healthier life involves becoming more mindful. The reason it does that is because one of the things that occurs is that when we are in danger, that dangerous time, that being subjected to something that's threatening breaks through our consciousness and makes us aware of it. But the same thing doesn't happen when we are in a situation in which our lives are pleasant or enjoyable. We can actually overlook those things that are enjoyable, and our minds can go a million miles away when we're in the face of something that could be enjoyable. For example, this morning, I live in Wisconsin, and we haven't had much snow this year, but overnight last night, we had a really beautiful snowfall, and I woke up this morning and all the trees have that coating of snow on them, and there's a nice bed of snow on the ground, and it would be very easy to just glance outside, but bury my head in my emails and get ready for the things that are going on today and overlook all of that. It takes a mindful awareness to pause and stop and actually pay attention, so that the real value of mindfulness is not to relax, it's not to avoid our problems, it's not even to be pleasant, to be feeling pleasant, it's to live our lives with full awareness. So I'm going to just pause just for a brief second, because at this point we may have a question or a comment or two, and we'll only take one or two because we got a late start today and I want to make sure that we get through everything. But if you've got a question, you can type it. There's a little message area there. So please take some time and ask a question or a comment, and I'll just pause here just for a second.
Well, you know, John, as you were talking, I was thinking it's kind of the reason why, at least in my experience, or however you want to describe it, that therapy for drug and alcohol addiction has such bad results, generally speaking, because people kind of, get comfortable and think, well, I've done that, check in the box, moving on.
It's the same reason why it's so difficult for people to stop smoking. They get to a point where they stop focusing on it because they've now stopped for several months, and then something comes along, and without even being aware of their lives, aware of the action that they're taking, they pick up a cigarette, and all of a sudden they're starting back into it again. There are many ways that we do this to ourselves, and it really requires a significant amount of attention to be able to pay attention and live our lives the way that we want to live them. That's actually true even if we're moving outside of the health and wellness arena. You think about being in a good relationship. One of the risks to it is that we can get so comfortable with it that we forget how incredible this person is that we're in a relationship with. And suddenly we get caught up in the trivial and the day-to-day arguments and lose focus on it.
Yeah.
Shall
I give you another question or so?
Sure.
Okay. Let's see. Dana wants to know, so how do you look at problems differently from being in crisis mode to mindfulness on a day-to-day basis? What's the difference in mindset between the two different approaches?
That's a really good question, because that leads us right into how to go about being mindful. And so thank you for that insightful.
Okay.
How does it help? That is actually the question.
Okay. Well, I'll save the other ones for later.
All right. Good. Mindfulness, the key to it is that it's a particular way of paying attention. So we can pay attention to our lives through a crisis mode, looking for threats, looking for difficulties, looking for ways to escape. And we have all kinds of ways in our language that we set ourselves up for this. But mindfulness is a different kind of paying attention. It's paying attention, first of all, in this present moment. This is one of my favorite cartoons, if you guys can see it. It says, I want to learn to live in the moment, not this moment, some other moment, like a moment on the beach. One of the problems we have with being mindful is that moment to moment, things are always changing. Sometimes what we are experiencing in this moment is not something that's particularly pleasant. but helpful for us to pay attention to. At another moment, it might be very pleasant and is something that's easier to pay attention to. But oftentimes, instead of being in the moment, we find ourselves a million miles away. I don't know if it's true for most of you, but sometimes when I'm in the shower in the morning, there are dozens of other people in there with me inside my head. They're not actually physically in there, of course, but I'm carrying on conversations and conducting meetings and doing all kinds of things instead of paying attention to being in the shower. Fortunately, we can do this. We can be caught up in our heads and do things, but one of the things that happens during that time is that we miss the sensations of being in the shower. It turns out that that's actually one of the issues that we have with eating a healthy diet. A healthy diet that has a good taste of that's rich in a plant-based, low carb, high protein diet is actually full of very delicate tastes, and it requires being present to those tastes in order to fully enjoy them. That's why a really good meal has to be eaten slowly, savored, in order to really appreciate it. It is this being in the moment when we're doing things that allows us to really connect and have a good, rich experience of what our life is right now. It is also the case that sometimes an unpleasant thing is really important to be paying attention to. If somebody starts a new exercise program, the most common thing that happens within the first 2 weeks of starting an exercise program for somebody that hasn't exercised before is that they'll injure themselves. And part of that is that they're not actually paying attention. They're putting on headphones, watching television. They're not noticing what's going on in their body. So they don't notice when their body is telling them to slow down or change the way that they're moving in some way, and so they pull a muscle or they injure themselves in some way. So the first thing is being in the present moment. We've all had the experience. You get in the car at the end of the day, you drive home, you arrive in your driveway, and you have no idea how you got there. You've been thinking about what happened during the day. You've been thinking about stuff you're going to do that night. We can drive on automatic pilot and not even notice where we are. Do you realize there are other people on the road that are doing the exact same thing, of course? And so we have this situation in which we can be doing things and our attention isn't actually where we want it to be. So the second dimension of being mindful, is to live your life on purpose, to be really showing up for your life as it's occurring, to be noticing the things you want to notice. One of the things that people discover when they try to sit down and be more mindful is that they start thinking about it and then suddenly their mind jumps tracks and it goes off to this worry or that thing. And part of that is simply learning how to pay attention, how to come back to paying attention to your life on purpose. The third dimension of mindful paying attention is, it was illustrated when I was at this condo that you're seeing the picture of right now, I hope. Hopefully that's showing up. And it was one of those days when at the end of the day it had been kind of cloudy some parts of the day. It would rain for a few minutes. It would clear up. The sun would come out, back and forth and back and forth. And on this particular day, as the evening came by, we were gathered on our deck and looking out over the Gulf of Mexico, and little water spouts started to emerge. Water spouts are like almost like mini tornadoes, except that they happen over the water, and they were coming up out of the water and spinning around so that the water would be all stirred up and then kind of fade back in. And as I'm watching this person walking the beach, and this water spout comes up about 50 yards offshore, moves in directly towards this individual to somewhere around 25 yards offshore, and then makes a turn and follows him down the beach. But this person never looked up. He was on his cell phone, all engrossed in some kind of conversation or other, and perhaps it was an important conversation, but he had his head down, looking at the sand in front of him, and here's this water spout just 25 yards away, right next to him, coming down the beach, and he never saw it. Oftentimes, when we are we're going through our lives where we think we know the situation so well that we forget to look at what the situation actually is. So I'm sure this person had walked that beach probably many times before. There was no need to look out over the water because he'd seen the water before, and what he was engrossed in his conversation was where his mind was. The third part of being really mindful is that we need to learn how to let go of judgments and really see things as they actually are. So these three parts of being mindful are what distinguishes this kind of attention from other kinds of attention. We're in the moment, we're paying attention to what we intend to pay attention to on purpose, we're letting go of judgments, and that allows us to be more connected to the things that are actually going on in our lives at that moment. It is not just a way of thinking, it is a way of being. So let's just pause here for a couple of extra minutes, and you said there were some additional questions, or maybe other people have some questions or comments at this point as we look at what's unique about being mindful.
Okay, let's see. Can you talk a little about the neurobiological changes that result from mindfulness? It's from Mary.
Sure. And we'll talk about this again in just a couple of seconds, but there are a couple of things that start to happen with being mindful. And one of the things you'll notice as I'm describing this for you is that the idea of mindfulness, being paying attention on purpose in the present moment and without judgment, is actually a relatively simple idea. Don't confuse simple with easy, but it's a relatively simple idea. What happens is that it begins to affect the brain in particular ways. It quiets the emotional centers, particularly the alarm centers, because we are able to be noticing what's happening for us as things occur. It starts to strengthen that part of the brain that is more responsible for being in control, for giving us the ability to make conscious choice. And it allows us to live in a state that is more aware and therefore more content and more peaceful, such that over time, we've actually been able to measure changes in the brain that occur. The two sides of the brain become more coherent so that we have the whole brain working together better. Those parts of the brain that are responsible for us feeling depressed or anxious or nervous tend to quiet down and be less likely to be activated. Those parts of the brain that see things holistically, that are more content, that are more rich, tend to become more active and actually increase in size over time. And so those brain changes start to occur. But what's important about all of this is that we would never say to somebody, okay, walk for the next hour. We're going to have this seminar. We're going to walk for this next hour. And once you're done walking for this next hour, you don't have to walk anymore because you're done. We realize that physical exercise is something that you have to engage in on a regular basis. It turns out that mental exercise, emotional exercise, also has to be practiced on a regular basis. It isn't enough for someone to attend a seminar like this, be inspired, if that would happen in a seminar like this, and feel really good at the end of it, and then say, well, okay, now that should last from now until forever. It's something that has to be practiced regularly over time in order to keep our brain in shape so that it functions in this way. And that's something that we've underappreciated. There should be opportunities to engage in mindful practice on a daily basis if you really want this to be working. Another question?
Actually, yeah. This is from Priya. Can you still remain candid and speak our minds without being judgmental in certain stressful circumstances? Is this part of being mindful?
It is. People who are mindful are often able to see and describe things very accurately and are able to suspend some level of judgment about that while they're being very accurate. One of the stories that's often told by mindful practitioners is this farmer who his horse runs away, and people come to him and they say, your horse ran away, that's terrible. And he said, well, I don't know if that's good or bad. About a week later, the horse comes back and brings with it a whole herd of wild horses that it has befriended, and they come right up into the farmer's house. And people come and say, your horse is back and brought all these other horses. That must be good. And he said, well, I don't know if that's good or bad. So his son gets on one of the wild horses and is trying to tame the wild horse. The horse bucks him off, and he falls off the horse and breaks his leg. And they come to him and they say, your son broke his leg. That's a horrible thing. That's really bad. And he says, I don't know if that's good or bad. And just at that time, the local king sends his troops in and gathers up all the able-bodied boys to press into military service, but leaves his son behind because he has a broken leg. Oftentimes we don't know what's good or bad as it's happening. That takes longer. But that doesn't mean that we don't see what's happening. And in fact, what mindful awareness allows us to do is to be able to see and comment on what's happening by removing that judging piece. Allows us to be able to see and comment on what's happening much more accurately and to be open then to what it is that might be happening next because we're not taking a place of knowing already what might be happening. So what I want to do is kind of move ahead a little bit here so that we can keep going. We already talked a little bit about like this before, but the brain is more like a muscle than we ever thought. It turns out that one of the things that mindfulness allows us to do is engage in a kind of systematic exercise of the brain, so that over time, people who practice mindfulness regularly can think more clearly, can be more open to the experiences that they're having, and make better choices in their lives because their brains are more fully equipped for that. And we could talk in some depth about that, but with the amount of time we have today, I'm going to kind of leave it at that. There's an openness to experience, and this is something that begins to be something that is important when we look at helping people to live a healthier lifestyle, a lifestyle that has more balance. One of the things that appears to happen as people go through their lives, children are open to almost everything. They're curious, they engage in all kinds of different activities, and over time, what we tend to do is we try to conserve energy, we try to focus our energy, we become very goal-oriented, and as a result, different parts of our experience fall into disrepair. Children typically, when they're 4 or 5, don't need any kind of regular exercise because they exercise simply because they find it interesting and fun to run and explore and be moving. It's hard for them to sit still. Over time, we spend more time sitting and being less physically active. Part of being mindful is to say, wow, you know, I should be more open to that when I'm taking a walk. Take some time and really connect to that and start to notice what it feels like to exercise and to watch my body get back in shape and do different things. That openness might involve different kinds of foods and being open to the delicate taste of a new dish that is healthy. It might involve being curious about a new kind of idea and allowing ourselves to dance or to engage in poetry or whatever. Part of what we can do for people on a very practical level, beyond training them all in mindfulness, is to pause when we're doing whatever activities for them to help them to become healthier, and just ask them, let's take a moment and be open to the experience that we're having right now, not just have it. Turn off the iPods. Turn off the television set. Let yourself actually be there for the thing that you're doing to be healthy. Take some time when you're eating and actually pay attention to what it is that you're eating instead of doing it while you're driving or something like that. Really make that a part of what you do. Another thing that happens with mindfulness is that it introduces us to see things and experience things in a more holistic way. We've often found ourselves in our lives getting caught up in just trying to survive. That's that crisis mode that we talk about. I just need to get through this day so that I can get home and put my feet up and watch some mindless television or something like that. But the human soul needs something bigger than that to connect to in their lives. Again, part of what we have seen, and one of the things that really struck me with my son was, I'm a psychologist. I was trained in a pretty behavioral psychology way, looking at how rewards increase behavior, punishment suppresses behavior, the absence of rewards eventually extinguishes the behavior, and I was trained to think this way. And then I began to think about, if that were entirely true, how is it that you could ever explain that someone would join the Marines? My son didn't do it because he was going to get something out of it. In fact, he gave up a lot. He had a steady job. He was doing something that he was thinking that he would do for the rest of his life. This event came along, and he said to himself, there's more to life than what I'm doing right now. I've got to contribute to the public safety. I've got to help people in my country be safer again. And so he went on this quest. He joined the Marines. He went to Iraq. He is, by the way, out of the Marines now. He finished his tour, and he's finished with that. He's a police officer now, so we don't have to worry about it anymore. But what he discovered in that was that this ability to be a person who is concerned about the public safety is really at the heart of who he is. When he struggles with being a police officer, it's always because he forgets to see the big picture. It's something that we want to keep reminding people about, to help them to connect themselves to the big picture. One of my favorite poets is a person by the name of David White. David White is a poet and business consultant, which is I always find to be a fascinating combination. But David White writes, anyone or anything that does not bring you alive is too small for you. Anyone or anything that does not bring you alive is too small for you. Sometimes when we are looking at helping people to live a healthier life and we are trying to get them connected to making some changes in their lives, sometimes the mistake we make is that we make it too small. We make it too easy for them. Just do this. You don't ever have to break a sweat. You can just do this in your spare time. You don't have to disrupt your life at all. And then we wonder why they can't keep it up, why they don't sustain it. Sometimes in our lives we need something bigger to be committed to in order to make the big changes that are required for us to live a healthier life. Don't be shy about painting the bigger picture for living a life that is not only healthier but higher quality, that allows you to have better relationships, that allows you to do the things that you really want to do as part of this process of becoming healthier. It is the thing that will allow people to do more, to actually make real change in their life, and that turns out to be the biggest issue oftentimes for us, is that we're reluctant to give them the bigger challenge, and so they take us seriously, and they only make small changes, and those small changes don't make enough change in their lives to make a difference. Mindfulness reminds us that there are actually big changes that are really helpful in our lives, and we are willing to make big differences in our lives to achieve something that's actually important. So I'm going to pause one more time because we're going to run out of time here, and take a few more questions, and then we'll kind of wind up.
Okay, well, here's a question from Ancha, I think. Let's see. Oops, I lost it. Somebody else commented. Can you still be mindful when watching TV or listening to music? For example, the music, really listening to the instruments and the music and focusing on the sounds.
The act of watching television and listening to music are probably quite different. You certainly can be mindful in both situations. The problem that we run into with television oftentimes is that it is often a very passive activity. So people will have the television set on, and because it's frequently interrupted every few minutes for commercials, the story line gets lost in the middle of that, and therefore it has a different emotional impact than, for example, a non-commercial interrupted story or a movie or something like that. But certainly those are opportunities for us to be able to be mindful and draw us in to being able to connect to the present moment within that musical piece or that story that's being told in some very important ways. That's actually important in another way, though, because oftentimes what we select to listen to or to watch has that kind of impact of drawing us into that kind of moment. And sometimes when we are in a particular emotional state, what we try to do is we try to match the way that we feel. So a young person who is feeling very depressed will oftentimes put on very depressing music to match how they're feeling. And that draws them deeper into whatever it is that is going on for them. I had a really good example of this a few years ago. I was working with a person who was a 911 operator, an emergency response person, and he was having trouble with anger. And so he was required to come and work with me to get his anger under control as a condition of keeping his job. So the very first day that he came in and sat down, and he was not at all happy having to be there, I asked him, when you're not at your job, what do you do to get yourself to do something that's relaxing for you? Well, it turns out that on his days off, he would go to racetracks and help the corner workers pull people out of accidents. When cars would go off the track and turn over, he would be the person that would arrive on the truck to try to get the driver out of the wreck, because he was matching the way that he was feeling. So one of the things that we want to be paying attention to when we're being mindful is, what are the moments that we're creating for ourselves? Are we creating moments that move us in the direction we want to go? Are we creating moments and being drawn into directions that we don't want to go? And so that's a really excellent question.
Super. Well,
we probably have time for one more.
Actually, there's a bunch more, so I'll ask Kelly to send them to you. But
okay.
I'll just grab this one from Dana, who says, here's the topic for the next webinar with Dr. Weaver: systemic exercises for the brain on a regular basis. It says, what is the date for this, so I can put it on my calendar now? So I guess you and I just have to grow up. But I think that's an excellent suggestion.
It is an excellent suggestion, and there are some things that we can do on a webinar like that. If there are people that are interested in something like that, what I would want to do is encourage anyone that's interested in that to think about that in terms of, how do we start to create ongoing programming, whether it's for personal or professional use in wellness settings, that actually begin to take seriously the need to have regular exercise for our brain that regularly allows us to keep this incredible instrument in the kind of shape that we need it to be able to have the kinds of lives that we really want to have. That's certainly a doable thing, and I think it would be a fascinating topic of conversation.
All right.
Well, I see we are right at the end of our time. So why don't you have Kelly send me those questions, and what I'll do is I'll take a few moments and try to answer as many of them as I can and send them back to Kelly, and she can post them for you.
Super. All right. Well, thanks so much, John. As always, technical problems or not, you are always awesome. And, you know, we gained people during the webinar, even with the technical difficulties. So, you know, you're always welcome here. And I think from Dana and all of us, you know, we want you back soon.
I appreciate your willingness to hang through the technical difficulties, everyone. And hopefully we'll be back soon.
All right, John. Well, everyone have a great weekend. See you soon. Take care, John. I'll see you in San Diego at Michael's conference in April.
Right, good.
So,
all right.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.